Hello, welcome to my top 10 best shows of 2022 and a happy new year to you. I'm actually going to cover all the shows that I watched, all 31 of them, but I'm going to just have 31 through 11 scroll up your screen pretty quickly with the rating out of 10 in parentheses so that you can see the rankings for all of the shows that I watched, all 31 of them. But then after I have 31 through 11 scroll up the screen, I'm going to do some honorable mentions, and then I will get into my top 10, which I will go show by show, breaking down my top 10. Now, just with all of my ratings and rankings type videos, this is based on my opinion and my opinion alone, and it is my honest opinion. I do not care if other people love the show and I didn't like it. I will be honest about that. So you will see in the 31 through 11 a bunch of shows you'll be shocked by because you think that they should be in the top 10, but not my top 10. And then once I get into the top 10, you'll see some shows that you think have no business being in the top 10 because you don't think they're as good as I do. But this is my top 10. This is my honest opinion, and I do not go by popular opinion at all. And of course, I'm only counting shows that I've actually watched. So if you're wondering why Better Call Saul is not on here, I haven't watched it. I will eventually go back and binge the whole thing, like I binged all of Breaking Bad after it finished its run. I'm just not a fan. Like, I'm not part of the fandom. Like, I think it's a good show, Breaking Bad was. And I'm sure Better Call Saul's a good show, but I'm just not part of the fandom. So that's why that won't be on here. I haven't watched it. I never watched Wednesday, even though everybody is making out like it's the greatest show ever made. I'm just not an Addams Family fan. I don't get the whole cultural phenomenon around the Addams Family, and I just don't give a crap about ever watching this show. Also, I would have had to have finished the shows. So there are 3 shows: the Quantum Leap reboot, the Beavis and Butthead reboot, and Lock and Key season 3 that I started watching and abandoned. They don't count. They don't make my list on the as a low ranking. They just don't make it at all because the rule is I have to have finished watching it. Another rule is that the show will have to have finished its run in 2022. So there is one show you'll see in my top 10 that started in 2021, but since it finished in 2022, it qualifies here. So those are the rules. Let me go ahead and show you my number 31 through 11, and in parentheses you will see the rating out of 10 that I gave each show. Here you go. Okay, there you have it. So quick note, if you may have noticed, my number 11 is Tales of the Jedi Season 1 and had a 9 out of 10 rating, but with a little asterisk by it. The little asterisk is to indicate that I'm weighting it differently. It's a different kind of 9. So when I get into my top 10, you'll see that numbers 10, 9, and 8 are actually 8.5 out of 10, but yet I have them ranked higher than Tales of the Jedi, and that's because Tales of the Jedi was a total of an hour and a half long. It was 6 shorts, and that just doesn't seem fair to compare it to 6, 8, 10, 13-hour long seasons. So it's a 9 out of 10 because it deserves a 9 out of 10 in my opinion, but it just weighted differently. And I have already set the precedent of counting these shorts, seasons of shorts, because I did last year. I did Visions, and I also did Love, Death, and Robots, and I counted Love, Death, and Robots already this year as well. So I count them, but I weigh them differently as far as the ratings. That's why there's a 9 asterisk, because you will see 8.5 out of 10s that are higher on my list. Now, before I dive into the top 10, I know I've been rambling a lot, but I gotta do honorable mentions. And I'm not going to just do 11, 12, and 13 on my list. What I'm going to do is shows that I have never, ever mentioned on my channel that I think are worth mentioning, because they're all shows I really highly enjoyed in 2022. So I'll do them as quickly as possible so that we can get into the top 10 proper. And I did notice a pattern. Last year, my pattern of honorable mentions was they were all animated shows, and I didn't do that on purpose at all. And this year, the pattern is they're all shows that are based off real life events, which I also did not intentionally do. It just ended up that way. Although the third show is very vaguely and very, very loosely based on something that happened once 100 years ago, a couple hundred years ago. But the other ones are more directly based on real life events. Anyways, let's go ahead and jump in to my honorable mentions. Starting with my first honorable mention, Inventing Anna. This was a Netflix show that was streaming earlier in 2022 in the spring, and it is based off something that happened very recently, where this woman who went by the name Anna Delvey kind of conned her way into high society and conned all these millionaires and billionaires into thinking that she was one of them when she had no money at all. And so it's a very interesting story. It's definitely fictionalized, and each episode tells you right at the beginning that it's fictionalized. So with shows like this, it's fun for me to see what really happened and what didn't really happen, and to start watching footage of the actual Anna Delvey, which was very, very interesting. It's a very interesting story to me that this person was able to pass themselves off as a millionaire or billionaire without having any money at all, but also is not a very good person, and she's not portrayed to be a very good person. But I found it very interesting, and also Laverne Cox plays a cis woman, and she's amazing. And also, after I was done watching this show, I kept going around talking like Anna Delvey all the time, and going like, "It's so basic. Why are you being so dramatic?" It's kind of funny accent. Anyways, Inventing Anna, the first honorable mention. Next honorable mention, another show that is based off of real life events. Winning Time: The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty. So I'm a basketball fan, so of course I'm going to be intrigued by this show, even though I grew up hating the Lakers. I was just very interested in this show, and it covers the first season of the Lakers dynasty, which is 1979 through 80, when Dr. Jerry Buss bought the team, and Magic Johnson had his rookie year. Now, the Lakers organization officially has denounced the show and instead tried to push their own Lakers documentary, which I think is just pro-Lakers propaganda. So that just made me want to watch this show even more and be more into it, because the Lakers organization is going to be uncomfortable with the fact that Dr. Jerry Buss and Magic Johnson were very bad womanizers. And in fact, Dr. Jerry Buss in some ways was an awful womanizer, and they're not comfortable with that truth being out there. So sorry. They will use the excuse that a lot of that didn't happen and it's fictionalized. We know, everybody knows it's fictionalized. It tells you right at the beginning of each episode. For me, it was fun to go and, just like with Inventing Anna, go and look and see what really happened and what didn't. And I was actually surprised at some of the things in this show that actually did really happen. So yes, we know it's fictionalized. That's not an excuse. What it was not fictionalized was Dr. Jerry Buss and Magic Johnson were womanizers. Sorry if that's uncomfortable for the Lakers organization. But John C. Reilly crushes it in this show as Dr. Jerry Buss. I love him so much. And the dude who played Magic Johnson is a new actor. He was very good as well. And I hope there's a season 2. I haven't specifically heard that this got canceled like all the other HBO Max shows, but I hope there's a season 2 because I really like this show. Moving into my final honorable mention is another HBO Max show. Our Flag Means Death, and I don't think this one's been canceled either, not that I've heard. So this is the one that's very loosely based on a thing that apparently happened in real life, where this aristocratic rich dude decided to become a pirate, and it didn't go well for him. But this is not at all reality-based. Tis a silly show. It is a show about silly queer pirates. Silly queer pirates. That's what this show is about. In fact, the first 2 episodes were a bit too silly for my taste, and I think that's why it kind of hurts the show. I give it an 8 out of 10. And it doesn't really become good until episode 3 when Taika Waititi comes onto the scene as Blackbeard. Taika Waititi crushes it. He's amazing, both as being a very silly pirate, but also on the dramatic side, as there is a mix of very, very silly humor with some very heart-wrenching and heart-breaking queer drama. I was definitely crying a little bit in the final episode. And again, I hope there is a season 2 because I did quite enjoy this show and I want to see more of Taika Waititi as Blackbeard. Okay, so there you have it. Those are my honorable mentions. Now, finally, at long last, I can get into what this video is actually about, which is the top 10. So I will start with my number 10 best show of 2022. Here we go.
Number 10. At number 10, Moon Knight, Season 1 with an 8.5 out of 10 rating. And actually, when I did my original review for this show, I did give it a 9 out of 10. I lowered it by half a point in retrospect based off of the finale. When I started thinking more and more about the finale, it really was a bad ending for this otherwise excellent season. It was way too rushed and should have been a 2-episode. So when I was looking at this compared to other shows that I gave 9s to, which there are a lot, which we'll soon see, I felt that it wasn't quite as good as those, so I knocked it down to an 8.5. And yet, it is still a very strong 8.5. It is still the best Marvel show of 2022, and it makes my top 10. And the reasons for all of this is primarily the incredible acting by Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke. They were phenomenal. I think it is probably the best acting in all of Marvel, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. And then there is that episode 4, the episode that explored Mark Spector's backstory and his trauma. It was heart-wrenching, it was hard to watch at times, but it was phenomenal. It was a phenomenal portrayal of trauma, and is one of the best episodes in any Marvel Disney Plus show, and I'll stand by that. So unfortunately the finale didn't quite live up to the rest of the show, which is why it is at only an 8.5, but still the show was so good that it does make number 10 on my top 10 list of 2022.
Number 9. Number 9. Number 9.
At number 9, Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi Season 1. And here's where my opinion will differ from most other people, especially by the fact that I do have this ranked a lot higher on my list than Star Wars Andor, which I'm sure some people find very offensive. But it's a combination for me of Andor being vastly overrated, as I've talked about on multiple occasions on my channel, and Obi-Wan being underrated in my opinion. I saw a meme right before it came on the air, and I don't remember the exact wording of the meme, but it was something along the lines of, oh yay, everybody's getting all hyped about Obi-Wan just so they can all trash it once it's on the air. And that's exactly what happened. I think this show is kind of a victim of high expectations, but it's a little baffling to me that some of the biggest complaints about the show is that it's too nostalgic or it relies too much on fan service. What exactly were you expecting from a show starring Ewan McGregor playing Obi-Wan Kenobi again? You were expecting it to not be nostalgic and not have any fan service in it? Like, I am kind of baffled about those complaints. I think the nostalgia actually works really well in this show, and I strongly disagree with the opinion that I've heard that we didn't need this show, that there was no point to it, it doesn't add anything new to the story. That's probably the statement that I disagree with most out of any statement about any show in 2022. I could not possibly disagree with that more, as this very much is a very important story that fills in the gap between episode 3 and episode 4, where there's definitely a disconnect between the way that Anakin and Obi-Wan are behaving with each other in episode 3 and how they behave in episode 4, and this beautifully fills in that gap. And of course, Ewan McGregor is excellent. And of course, the girl who plays Princess Leia is also really good. She was the surprise of 2022. I was not expecting her to be as good as she was. So overall, I really, really love this show. And I don't care that most people like to take a dump on it. And I don't care that most people think Andor is better. I said what I said. This is number 9 with an 8.5 rating out of 10.
Number 8.
At number 8, Star Trek Discovery Season 4 with an 8.5 out of 10 rating. Speaking of shows that people like to take a dump on, Star Trek Discovery has historically been every Trekkie's favorite toilet that people just like taking a big crap on. Sorry about the very crude analogy, but it has been my experience that people do like to hate on Discovery, and to be fair, Discovery certainly has been a flawed show all throughout its run. However, Season 4 is most certainly the best season of Discovery to date. Now, it's still only an 8.5 rather than a 9 or a 10 because it still has the lingering problem of being too long and having too many extraneous episodes. It was 13 episodes, should have been no more than 10, could have probably been 9 or 8. But other than that, I thought this was an excellent season of television. Had some of the best acting that I've ever seen in Discovery and even in modern Trek. And the relationship between Michael Burnham and Book was absolutely golden and beautifully portrayed by both actors. That episode 7, I want to say it was, the one right before the mid-season break, is one of the best episodes in modern Trek and probably one of the best episodes in all of Star Trek. And it was just a bunch of people standing around or sitting around talking, and it was so good. It gets a little bit rough after that. There's a little bit rough going in the middle. There's a lot of things that probably could have been cut out there. But once we get into meeting Species 10C and how they have to learn how to communicate with them, that was absolutely beautiful. The ending was absolutely beautiful. So this is one of the best seasons of modern Trek, and it is an 8.5 out of 10 and comes in at number 8 on my list. At number 7, The Time Traveler's Wife, Season 1. And now we are getting into my 9 out of 10 shows, and there are a bunch of them. All shows from numbers 2 through 7 on my list are 9 out of 10, so I had to kind of rank the 9 out of 10 shows. And coming in at number 7 is The Time Traveler's Wife. Now, I just did a video on this 2 weeks ago. This was my most underrated show of the year, so I don't really have a whole lot more to add to that. Just go and watch that video to hear my thoughts on it. Needless to say, I loved the novel this was based on, and the show finally does the novel justice, because there was a crappy movie a few years ago and the show actually does it right. Unfortunately, they made the huge mistake, in my opinion, of trying to be fancy and splitting the story up. They should have done one 12-episode limited series to cover the whole book, but they decided, oh, we'll just do one season of half the book and season 2 will be the other half of the book, except it was canceled, and it still irritates me that it was canceled because I love this show so very much. Anyways, go ahead and watch my most underrated show of the year video after you're done watching this one, and you can hear more details about this show. But needless to say, it is number 7 on my top 10 shows of 2022.
Number 6, number 6, number 6.
At number 6, Westworld Season 4, another show with a 9 out of 10 rating. And another show that was canceled by HBO Max prematurely. They only had one season left to go. And I do kind of understand why it was canceled. It was the lowest rated season of Westworld. I think a lot of people got turned off by seasons 2 and 3, even though my brother and I both strongly disagree with that and think that season 1 is actually the weakest season. But I know we are on an island with that opinion. But as far as season 4 goes, it is arguably one of the strongest, if not the strongest season of Westworld, particularly in that middle. They had one of the most phenomenal twists I have seen on a TV show in a long time, and I am one who doesn't usually like twists. I think that they are overused, but the one in the middle of season 4 is amazing. And also, I just kept thinking as I was watching this season how much I miss a really good serialized mystery like this. Like, there hasn't been one this good since Lost in its heyday, before the ending. And it is so well acted too. They have such a great cast. I am so sad that this got canceled. And while I don't think that the ending is the worst ending for a series, I also think that it could have been better. I think that it would have been better if we got to have a season 5. But putting that aside, this was such a great season of television, and it comes in at number 6 on my top 10.
Number 5 is alive.
At number 5, The Expanse, Season 6. So, The Expanse kind of always suffers in my top 10s because of the fact that it always comes out in January, and by the time I do my top 10, I've kind of forgotten about it. It's not fresh in my head anymore. It actually started in December of 2021 and finished up in January of 2022, and it is supposedly the final season of The Expanse, and I think that it is. We may get more of the books told in the form of a miniseries or movies in the future, but as far as a TV series, I do believe that this is the final season, and if that is the case, this is an incredibly strong final season for a pretty strong show overall. And I did have some issues with the finale, which is why it's a 9 out of 10 instead of a 10 out of 10. But I didn't have issues with the very, very ending, how the show ended with the characters. It reminded me of the ending of Star Trek The Next Generation's All Good Things, where they were all sitting around the poker table, which is one of the best endings for characters of any show ever. So putting The Expanse in that same realm is a high compliment indeed. And overall, it was a very strong season, which I quite enjoyed. So it comes in at number 5 on my list with a 9 out of 10 rating.
The Fantastic Four.
At number 4, Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3. Now, after Season 3, I think it is time for all of us to admit that Lower Decks is a legit Star Trek show. Not just a Star Trek comedy show or a Star Trek animated show. It is a legit good Star Trek show, and it proved it in season 3 with the character stories and of course the comedy, and almost every single episode was strong, if not excellent. There is one exception. This season does contain my least favorite episode in the entire series, but that is a glaring exception, as the rest of the season was so good. And the scary part is that I think there's still room for improvement, so I expect season 4 to be even better, and I am now legitimately excited and thrilled about watching every single episode of this excellent Star Trek show, and it is so good that it comes in at number 4 on my top 10 shows of 2022.
3, 3, 3.
At number 3, A League of Their Own Season 1 with a very strong 9 out of 10 rating. Now, if by chance you haven't seen this show yet and you're wondering why I'm having a show based off of a cheesy movie from the 90s about women's baseball on my list, I will tell you right now that it is absolutely nothing like the Tom Hanks and Geena Davis film, which was much more family friendly, and there's nothing wrong with that except that it doesn't really go into the real life issues that women in a league like this would have been dealing with on a daily basis. Like, it touches on the sexism in a very family friendly kind of way, but this really dives more deeply into the sexism that these women were facing. It also deals with racism head on, and most importantly for me, it deals with anti-queer sentiment in the 1940s. And though that obviously is really bad right now, in the 40s there were much fewer people who were out, and you could legit go to jail if you were caught being queer. Just for simply existing as yourself, you could go to jail, and this is something that the women of the show are dealing with in every episode. And then separately, it deals with queer black culture and what that would have been like in the 1940s. This show is so good, and it balances that serious drama, that serious exploration of those issues, with a really good, sharp, cutting-edge kind of comedy that works so well in conjunction with the drama in this show. And I find it to be a big improvement over this silly family-friendly humor from the original film. So an excellent show. If only it hadn't gotten off to a slow start. It takes 3 or 4 episodes to get really good. It could have been a 10 out of 10, but as it is, it's a 9 out of 10 and number 3 on my list. Just the two of us, number 2. At number 2, Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1. About as strong of a debut season of any show that you could possibly ask for, except for perhaps number 1 on this list, which I'll get to in a couple minutes. But as far as Star Trek shows go, this is clearly the best first season of any Star Trek show, because usually the first seasons aren't that great, but this was a smashing debut for this show, and it just proved why the fans really wanted to see it, because Anson Mount, Rebecca Romijn, and Ethan Peck, as well as some of the guest stars, including the woman who plays T'Pring, are really, really good. And the woman who plays Uhura also is excellent in the show in a supporting role. The woman who plays Leon also is excellent in the show. It's excellent acting, but also really well written, really well constructed character stories. The show gets a lot of prop for returning to the episodic format of Star Trek, which it does do a very good job at, but what goes understated is the serialized character stories that run throughout the season, with the best one being about Captain Pike dealing with knowing about his future. It starts in episode 1 and ends brilliantly in episode 10, which I consider to be one of the best episodes in the entire Star Trek franchise, not only because of how good of a callback it is to an original series episode, but just how they combine that with an excellent character story about Captain Christopher Pike, played amazingly by Anson Mount. So an incredible first season for Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and I cannot wait for season 2. Number 1. And my number 1 show of 2022 is House of the Dragon Season 1, the only show in 2022 that I gave a 10 out of 10 rating. And this show has gotten its fair share of criticism, some of which I agree with, but the vast majority of which I disagree with. And It's not absolutely perfect, as I said in my review for it. Unfortunately, that episode 9 was a little bit disappointing for me, but it still gets a 10 out of 10 rating, and it's still the best show of 2022, in large part because of the writing and the acting. The writing, I think this was the best adaptation of a novel that I've seen in a very long time, if not the best, because it takes a historical text and reads between the lines and adds things in on its own that are just perfect and fit the story so well and fit the actors so well. Both the younger actors and the older actors are all phenomenal out throughout this season. The pacing could have been a little bit better, but it doesn't take away from the excellence of this show overall. And most importantly, this show brought me back to a franchise that I used to love, that I had become sour on, thanks to Game of Thrones seasons 7 and 8. And I think it's important not to forget how bad season 7 also was in Game of Thrones. And it really soured me on a franchise that I had previously loved. And House of the Dragon, much to my surprise, was able to bring me back to that franchise and allow me to appreciate it again in a way that I haven't in a very long time. So for that, I am very thankful, and I love, love, love this show, and it is my number one favorite show of 2022.
Thank you so much for watching my top 10 best shows. This has been a blast as usual. I hope that you also had fun watching my version of a top 10, which I know is different than yours. So I appreciate you watching, liking, subscribing, commenting, and doing all of those things. So have a very, very happy new year, and I will see you in 2023. Goodbye, everybody.